Hey, this is Joe Gilder from PreSonus. Today we're going to walk through what the limiter plugin is and how to use it. The goal of this video is to give you kind of a quick and dirty guide to using the limiter when you export your mixdowns. For me, whenever I export something to listen elsewhere, whether it's just a rough mix of a guitar vocal I just recorded or the final master of a project and anywhere in between, that mix goes through a limiter before it gets exported. Meaning I always have a limiter on my main output or on my master fader, whatever you want to call it, because otherwise it's too quiet. So the general nature of things, we record at certain levels so we don't clip, then we mix all those sounds together, and if we want them to be as loud as we're used to hearing other pieces of music, finished, mastered music, we can't turn it up without it clipping. The limiter allows us to turn this up without clipping. It's a brick wall, like they call it, where any of those peaks that might have clipped before now get turned off. So we can turn up the volume, hopefully not too much, just to get the volume up without clipping. So here is a mix. And as you can see, I've got the level meter plugin pulled up. By the way, if you have level meter in your session and you want it to be vertical, just click and drag in the corner and you can turn it into vertical, just like that. That's how I prefer it. Anyway, so if I set this to, when I'm mixing, I use the K20 metering. That means the loudest sections of the song, the signal goes into the red. This is showing me an average level. And kind of the regular verse of the song down here, you can see it's pretty quiet. It's getting up just here at 0 where the green turns into yellow, and then over here is kind of the loudest part of the song. So that's at K20, and that allows me to get a great sounding, nice loud mix by turning up my speakers. And you can see I'm still several dB shy of clipping. But if we listen to this, we'll hear it's got a good volume, but it's not as loud as it could be. So here's that. Sounds beautiful, but if I were to play that right next to something else in my music library, that something else would come in a good bit louder. So here's what I do. Even if I'm not quote-unquote mastering this, I'm just doing an export to listen in the car, send it to a buddy, listen on earbuds, I still want to do this process. So that process looks like this. I open up Limiter. So Limiter2 it's been updated with version 5, and here's how I set it up. I turn it on, and here are the settings that I like. Typically, these are my default settings here. I've got the gain turned up to about 6. I found, generally speaking, if I'm mixing at K20 and then I want my masters to be at K14, which is this meter here, that's about a 6 dB difference. So typically, if I mixed it well at K20, a 6 dB boost into K14 should work. So before we add any boost, let's take a look at the meters here. We can see, let's go back to the level meter. We can see when the meter is set to K20, I can see we're well into the red, but if I switch to K14, you can see we're just in the yellow. It doesn't even technically even touch the red till about right here. This is the loudest part of the song. I want this to be a little bit louder. That's what I'm talking about here. So if I take this limiter, which has the same kind of metering here so I can see what's going on, if I look at K14, I can see, okay, in this loudest section of the song right here, I want this to be up in the red. And I found, generally speaking, that happens at about 4 to 6 decibels. So we're going to go 6 just because that's kind of what I normally do. And now we can see there's some limiting happening. This level gain reduction meter right here, it's not happening all the time, but at the loudest sections, it's hitting it a little bit harder, okay? So if we take a listen to this, this is what that sounds like. I'll turn it off and then I'll turn it on. Now to my ears, that's maybe a little bit much, so this mix was maybe a little hotter than normal. I would maybe pull back the amount of gain just a little bit. So maybe this is closer to 4 instead of 6. Now there's a couple other settings here. Some of them I don't touch. So one of them is the ceiling setting. I set that at -1. That gives me a full decibel of kind of safety room, because sometimes signals, intersample peaks and things get past the ceiling of the limiter. So if you have it set to 0, anything that happens to get past it, which just happens sometimes, is going to cause clipping. So I have it down a full decibel, which is what a lot of my mastering engineer friends recommend. And then the threshold, I just leave at -1 as well. The way I get more volume is by increasing the gain. You could also pull down the threshold. I like to increase the gain. That's just the way I like to work. Now this mode button here, you may see that's fairly new in the limiter plugin if you've used Studio One for a while. If you don't know how something works in Studio One, here's a magic trick. Press F1 and check it out. Our kind of Studio One version of the manual pops up with limiter right there. Like it knows what I'm looking at and it pulls up that section of the manual, and I can see mode toggles between modes A and B. Mode A, the limiter is always clean with no distortion. However, in mode A, the limiter response is a bit slower. With mode B, the limiter reacts more quickly to the signal, but depending on the settings, a small amount of distortion may occur. So if you've ever used limiters before, you know that if you go with a really fast release time, you can get this kind of distorted sound because the limiter is releasing so quickly it kind of sounds distorted. Here's what that sounds like. Let me free. So a general rule of thumb with limiters is the faster both attack and release, but especially the release time, the faster that is, the more kind of distortion can be there. So I tend to set my release somewhere around 200, maybe even as high as 500 milliseconds, because it's just a nice chill release. I'm just hitting the peaks, and if it drops off quickly, it has this kind of crackling sound. As far as mode goes, I would just switch between them and listen. Technically, I would say A makes more sense for your entire mix because it's not going to have any distortion, but I would just pull in a few songs and flip between A and B and see which one you like better. Now, as far as attack, I tend to find the slow attack setting sounds better. I don't know what technically I don't know if it says in the manual here. I don't know exactly what the milliseconds are, but I like the way slow sounds. So I push up the level till it's about the level that I want. I keep an eye on the gain reduction to make sure it's not going super nuts. And if it is going nuts, I listen to see if I still like that sound. And I leave the ceiling and threshold alone, and I may toggle back and forth between A and B depending on to see which one I like the sound of more. But that's my simple approach. I will add limiter at the end of a mix. I'll slap it on there for the export, then I'll turn it back off. Or if I'm mastering using the project page, limiter will be at the very end of the chain, and it'll be bringing up the overall volume of the entire track. And one final thing, we have 2 modes up here, soft clip and true peak. Soft clipping is where it gives you a little bit of a clipping sound as it's doing its thing. That can be great for mixing if you want to throw that onto a vocal or a bass track or something to take care of some of those peaks and give it a little bit of a vibe. But for this, almost always I'm setting it to true peak, which is a little more proper limiter setup for doing things like mastering and putting it on your entire mix. So here's what the final version sounds like. I think I'm happy with it. Let me free. And like I said, quick and dirty example of how I use limiter. Take these same approaches and work out your own way of using it. But if you find that you're exporting mixes that are just too quiet, maybe you don't have a limiter on the output. And that's something should have available to you if you're an artist or Studio One Pro user. For more like this, head over to our YouTube channel and check out all the videos we've been doing over the last couple of years to help you make better music using Studio One. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.